All right, we now move into our last set of problems, and this is kind of a bonus set. If you are having trouble with the other problems that we've gone through in this particular lesson, if you're still feeling like those are pretty tough, you might want to just maybe make note of the timestamp on the video here and make note to yourself to come back and start here again, maybe in a day or two, maybe after you've had a chance to start working on the assignment with the others and feel like you've gotten your head around it. Because we're just going to take a look at a few special cases that can crop up as we do this kind of factoring. And I just want to make sure that you've seen them so that you aren't totally surprised. All right, so let's work through these. And of course, just like all of the problems that we do, yes, these become part of your notes as you watch this. So write them down. And not just the original problem and answers, but anything I talk about, like, hey, remember this, those would be good things to write down so that you do remember them. All right, so we're going to start with the top left problem here. Here we have x squared minus 25. The process, yes, is the same as what we were just doing before because we're factoring a quadratic, so I'm going to end up with two sets of parentheses. And each parenthesis starts with x, that's why we get the x squared. But what are we adding to and what are we multiplying to? Because there's only one other term. There's just that minus 25. Well, normally there's a term that has an x in it. That term that normally has the x in it is normally over here. The only way that that term can just totally disappear out of the equation is if it's a 0x. And so what that means is that the 25 then must be what we're multiplying to. So this is basically saying what multiplies to negative 25, but adds to 0. Now we can go ahead and figure out what our combination is. So in order to add to 0, you know you have to have a positive and negative version of the same number. So like 1 and negative 1, add to 0. 2 and negative 2, add to 0. 3 and negative 3, add to 0, and so on and so forth. I'm just looking for the pair of those that multiplies to negative 25. That would be negative 5 and 5. And so that would be our factored form for this first one. All right, next problem. I'm going to go to the top right. In this case, we have x squared plus 8x. Notice here, I am missing a term again, but the term that I'm missing is the one that just has a number on it, the one without an x. So that would be the part that goes right here. So it's kind of like, in order for that to be gone, that part is 0. So if you'd like to think about it as what multiplies to 8 but adds to 0, you could. But if you do that, it can lead to a slight error with this because the two numbers that would add to 8 but multiply to 0 would be 0 and 8 because the only way you multiply to 0 is by multiplying by 0. But x plus 0 looks kind of odd. Normally we wouldn't write x plus 0 because x plus 0 is just x. So in this sort of a case, that would be our final answer, which yes, we could get it by that whole add to multiply to again, but you'll notice there's another way you could have gotten this, actually by using the same factoring tools that you've already been doing before we hit this section, which was noticing that in our original expression up here, there was an x in both terms. And so I could then just factor that x out of both of those terms. Either way you think about it is fine, but do realize it's the exact same thing. All right, now we go to the bottom left question, x squared minus 81. In fact, both of these on the bottom, I think you might be able to do them on your own first. So actually, why don't you take a look at those, pause the video, work them out on your own, and then resume the video. So the reason why I was saying that you should be able to do these last two is because they're very much like the ones directly above them. So if I'm going to be factoring this x squared minus 81, that one's like the x squared minus 25. I know I'm going to end up with two sets of parentheses, and I need to add to 0 while multiplying to negative 81. Well, remember, to add to 0, it has to be the same number, just a positive and negative version of that number. So I'm trying to think about what multiplies by itself to give me 81, and that answer is 9. And so it would factor down to be x minus 9 times x plus 9. And then for this last one, remember, I don't even have to think about what adds to and multiplies to for this one. I can just say, hey, there's an x in both terms. So I'm going to factor that x out of both of those terms. So if I take x squared and divide it by x, I'm just left with x. And if I take negative 11x and divide it by x, I end up with just negative 11. And so that would then be complete. Now remember, these last 4 problems, these were kind of special cases. These are unique scenarios that crop up. I just wanted to show them to you so they didn't trip you up as you go forward. But still, the big idea out of this lesson today was, in order to factor a quadratic, you need to figure out what 2 numbers add to that middle number and multiply to that last number, and then put them into the parentheses.